Yay! We're live. Okay, we'll wait just a few more minutes to see if we're going to get some more friends, people, students to join us for today's live stream. I'll get my notes ready here so we can talk about the Baroque era. A lot of stuff to go over today for sure. So I know we'll have some people joining us for today's live stream on the awesomeness of the Baroque. But many of my students in music appreciation will be listening to this after the fact. Totally cool, all good. Who knows when you'll get to enjoy all this coolness. But yeah, just stand by for a moment and we are going to get into it. Getting ready for the day with some coffee here and some Baroque notes. Doing a discount double check as I always like to do, just to make sure that, you know, PowerPoint's looking good. My lecture notes are ready to go so I can highlight and take you through some things here. Okay. All right, we'll wait one more minute as is typical. I like to launch it, go live, and then wait at least a minute, well, really 2 minutes. Give us everybody a chance to get cozy and get comfortable and learn about the Baroque era. You know, in previous lectures, I've talked about Elvis Presley, I've talked about the Beatles, Rihanna, Eminem. I've talked about artists, you know, like Scott Joplin, mentioned, you know, tons of other artists, Bruce Springsteen and Manfred Mann, just a lot of other, that like the list just seems to go on and on and on. Um, so I want to make sure we keep moving forward in the class, talking about, hey, what's going on in the 1600s, you know? Okay, I think we're just about there. One more coffee break. Okay, that's 2 minutes of kind of waiting and chilling time. I'm going to jump into it. Let's go. Yay, we are live. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mr. Schermerhorn, music and percussion instructor at STC. A little pause there. Mr. Schermerhorn, music and percussion instructor at STC at South Texas College. So today we kick off the Baroque period with an overview. Oh, yay, more people joining. Okay, yay. Awesome. I'm going to try that again. Yay! We are live. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mr. Schermerhorn, music and percussion instructor at STC, South Texas College. See, I still can't even say it. At any rate, Mr. S here. We're going to kick off the Baroque period with an overview of the era. So our goals for today are, what's the Baroque era all about? Define the word Baroque. Talk about the elements of music in the Baroque era. What's the story behind Stradivarius string instruments? The orchestra begins to take shape. The keyboard instruments of the Baroque. What is our newest genre, style, or form of music for the time? An introduction to some of the genres, styles, and forms of the Baroque. And ending with culminating figures of the times, Vivaldi, Handel, and Bach. So I know that's a lot. I'm just kind of going down the list, basically. But number one is, what's the Baroque about? Number two is, how do we define Baroque? Number three is elements. Number four is the story behind Stradivarius string instruments. Number five is about the orchestra taking shape. We get to number six, and it's the keyboard instruments of the time. We get to seven, is there some kind of new music of the period that's really important we need to talk about? Number eight is really an intro to some of these different genre styles and forms. And number nine, well, this is maybe kind of a long list. It's who are the big people, who are the culminating figures of the period? You know, Vivaldi, Handel, and Bach. While there's certainly many more awesome figures and amazing musicians and artists of the time, I'm choosing to focus on three of those. Okay, so let me get over to the PowerPoint. Make sure you get a good viewing of that. Okay. So that should be nice and clean on your screen there as you're watching during the live stream, or later on as you're getting ready for quizzes, assessments, um, final exam, homework assignments, whatever you're working on. All right. So basically, this is an overview of the Baroque era, Baroque epoch. I mean, we could also call this we could say introduction to the Baroque, an overview of the Baroque, but I could see it both ways: introduction or an intro, an overview of the Baroque era. So, what's it all about? The arts, music elements, the music, some really important things. So, if we take a look at, all right, where's it all start at? Let me move up PowerPoint slide here. Okay, so the Baroque era, we're looking at 1600 to 1750. Now, this was a time characterized by absolute monarchy, bloody religious wars, Protestants versus the Catholics. We also have this exploration and colonization of the New World. We're talking about the Mayflower in 1620. Now, we do have the rising middle class. Middle class, they're really like eager and excited to, they want to partake in artistic and musical culture. They want to become a viable patron of the arts. What does all that mean? Well, we get the rise of the middle class, and the middle class, they want to do their own thing. They want to have their own flow, their own thing. They want to be able to participate and actually go watch concerts and see artists, and so when we get public concert halls, um, and then we also get one of our first opera houses around 1637 or so. These kind of concert halls and opera houses. They're built so that anyone that's can pay for like a ticket, or anyone that with basically the price of admission could attend these concerts. So a cool thing for the times that maybe is a normalcy for us today. It had these kind of things, started there. So when we think about like the Baroque period of like big ticket items, there's a lot of them. I didn't include that slide, but I'll try to highlight. And I think the rise of the middle class is a big thing for the times. The rise of the female professional singer, a big thing for the times. The melodic sequence, music notation, standardized. These are some of those things, and I'll come back to that throughout this lecture, so we can kind of keep adding to that list. And maybe in the future, I need to include maybe another like slide or assignment or just something that says, hey, we can call it the big ticket items, or these are the big things in the period. And the period is much more than just a list of linear items, but I do want to kind of get us thinking. So I haven't listed them all yet, but we're getting that conversation started on what are the big ticket items. And, that might be something I'll come back to for participation in the comments as well. Okay. So yeah, double check and slide. Okay, I want to talk about some of the music in a moment. Now, the next thing we want to talk about in terms of the Baroque era is like, okay, are there like other things going on in terms of, science? I want to move to that for, just a moment, and I'll come back and talk about some of that music. I'm going to move the slide a little bit. I'll come back. I want to talk just a moment about like discovery paintings, books and plays. I mean, I suppose I could change the order of this later, but I just thought it made more sense to kind of jump to that for a moment, because the Baroque period, this Baroque era, is really considered to be an age of discovery. We've got these prominent figures like Galileo, Copernicus, Sir Isaac Newton, and William Harvey, and they're important because when you think about taking any kind of historical type class, and what we're trying to do is not just the history of music. I mean, in music appreciation and of course in American music that I teach, now we kind of split off in some different areas. But specifically for any type of historical class and looking at music appreciation, it will be a little easier to understand and maybe a little more enjoyable if you kind of have some ideas of like, well, what was going on if we know the Baroque era 1600 to 1750. Is this just a music period, or is this an arts period, or were there other things going on? And like, it's a period in time. So it's a snapshot, it's a period, it's an epoch, it's an era. But we're not talking about just music. When we talk about this age of discovery, we're talking about Galileo confirms Earth revolves around the sun. We're talking about William Harvey explains blood circulation for the first time. Rembrandt, Self-Portrait is of this times. Robinson Crusoe, written by Defoe, is during this time. To be or not to be? That is the question, or something like that. Well, Shakespeare, Hamlet. This is during that time. So, um, some some things to basically get us in the frame of mind of the times. Now, if I move back, I'm going to go back up to the slide here. If we go back up to, what's the Baroque era all about, and you heard me talk about the era, we just want to remember, music, dance, painting, sculpting, architecture, and so much more. There's a lot of things going on in the period. But obviously, with religious wars and the rise of the middle class, concerts from the palace to the concert hall, and I'm highlighting Toccata and Fugue in D minor. So take a look at that. I don't play the music on any of the music appreciation live streams or my other course, American Music. I don't play them here because of copyright issues, but I do make sure that there is a YouTube playlist where you can go through and listen to the music as you're doing assignments. And then for anything, let's say Baroque or classical, I'll make study guides of saying, hey, like, pay attention to this, that, or whatever, like just giving you focal points. This is even more above and beyond than my how-to videos or tutorial videos when I do those listening guides where I just type it all up and say, hey, don't miss this, check this out, Kind of just helps dial some things in. Okay, so, during Baroque times, music making starts to become centered in the home, the church, and university rather than the salons of the aristocracy. And we've got a lot of musical works of the era that are just like they're they're functional. I mean, they're being created for specific occasions such as weddings, festivals, or religious services. And that's really important right there because you heard me talk about the concert hall, but I'm going to come back to this whole music making, at the home, church, and university. We're going to talk about aristocracy and what is patronage and the patronage system in terms of musicians getting work, working for kings, queens, dukes, duchess, princesses, etc. Um, but for now, make sure that you take a listen to Toccata and Fugue in D minor by J.S. Bach and see what you think. Listen. Obviously, when you're done with the live lecture, or when you're done listening in your own time, check out these songs. See what you think. Okay, so that's a little bit about getting this intro overview going on in the Baroque era. All right, so um, we want to try to figure out, okay, how can we define the word Baroque, or maybe say a few things about the times. So looking at the PowerPoint, you're just seeing, okay, like you got some basic notes there on like, okay, these are Baroque thoughts and ideas. So with Baroque thoughts and ideas, I'm just trying to get you to like understand, hey, these are the basics. I could sit there and go through and read. I know some of my students will want to listen to just the audio, and that's awesome too. Um, but basically on Baroque thoughts and ideas in terms of what was going on, look, we could say that the Baroque era was a time of extravagant style, complex forms, and contrasting elements. But it's also a time of exaggeration and energy and just really excessively ornate. Now, the dichotomy of the Baroque was that of there was this wasteful luxuriousness and extreme poverty. So some might say, though, that the Baroque is maybe you could, you know, that the Baroque word, maybe when we talk about Baroque or just trying to figure out how do you translate or define that Baroque, the word Baroque, that they would say, well, maybe Baroque could be abnormal, maybe Baroque is bizarre. Okay, maybe so. Um, but really, if we had to pick one word for the Baroque, how about, let's say, decorative? Yes, that will do nicely. Decorative. Now, where's kind of the context or something like, well, where's this, ornate, decorative? Oh, okay, I get it. But what can we lean into or lean on to try to make a little more sense of this whole decoration business? And I would say this, you could go to, um, if you take a look at the photo of the grand staircase of the Resendes home, this is Prince Bishop of Würzburg, Germany, built around, let's see, maybe 1720, 1744. It's in that timeline. And look, you'll see this photo. It's pretty much in I don't want to say all, but it's in a lot of the music appreciation textbooks. This particular photo, Resendez, Prince Bishop, Wurzburg, Germany. You'll see that photo, and it's really it's an awesome example of like Baroque interior design. And all you'd have to do is just look at that, look at that staircase, and not just the staircase. I would say like look at everything, look at the staircase, but look at look at the picture, look at the painting, look and see what pops out at you: the walls, the ceilings, the staircase. You know, pay close attention to the decorative nature of everything you see in that really famous painting picture that's used in many historical books for that talk about this period. And um, it just so much stuff that pops out at you there. So now, look, there's a lot of thoughts and ideas on Baroque, and I'm not going to answer all the questions today or share every detail and every thought and idea. But the idea is that in the intro slash overview is to kind of kick things off and get it going. We want to make sure that we continue to explore more of these thoughts and ideas and the music and the times while we chat about, George Frederick Handel, Antonio Vivaldi, and of course, J.S. Bach, or should I say, Bach. A little hard for me to say it with braces. Even as I look back to my intro, I'm like having a little fun repeating the intro, trying to get trying to say it correctly, of course. So now, I do want you to take a listen to Cello Suite 1. This is the prelude, J.S. Bach. Bach writes 6 unaccompanied cello suites. So listen specifically to Cello Suite 1, the prelude by J.S. Bach. And I think you might be surprised that you might have heard that before. And so I'd be curious if you have heard it before, then in the comments box on the YouTube video, later on in your own time, put like, not Google where you heard it, like tell me, if you actually have heard it, like for real, and you didn't have to Google it, like put that in the, in the comments box. That'd be something kind of cool. Tells me that, hey, you actually listened to the lecture. So that'll be a comment, comment challenge number 1, or participation opportunity number 1. Everyone always asks me for extra credit. I'm like, well, there you go. I mean, that's it right there. Okay. So let's take a look. Want to move over to digging into kind of the elements. We talk about the elements in music, in music appreciation, and also I teach that. I teach that in all my courses. But we want to make sure that we know that in the elements of music, it's something that's going to carry through everything. So we talk about, melody, harmony, rhythm, dynamics, texture, form, instruments, and vocals. And so we don't want to leave that out in any period that we're studying, that the elements are a big part of pretty much all of our history, history of music. So let me move over to our elements here. So I know I kind of did some of this out of order, but we got Baroque Thoughts and Ideas, Discovery Paintings, Books, Plays. Okay, we got music elements 1 and music elements 2. Okay. During the live class, during the live class, we typically have some active participation, and we do some singing and dancing and drumming. And while I can't do that I guess I could on a live stream by myself. But even in a online class where everyone's doing kind of their own thing, I have you record it and send it to me. Nah, you don't have to do that. The whole singing thing does help with something like row, row, row your boat when you're trying to figure out, like I say this vocabulary word imitation, and you're just like, I don't know what you're talking, like, what is that? So you can Google and YouTube all you want, but and you can certainly, there's a lot that you can learn. I mean, you can get a library card and, read lots and lots of books, and yes, you can like really digest and get some awesomeness happen. You can do the same thing with YouTube, where you can learn pretty much anything you need between, say, like a library and maybe YouTube. But that third element is like the actual practicalities of doing it. And if you add that fourth element, it'd be like learning that stuff with a pro. So if you've got, a library card, access to YouTube, and, access to a pro, like face-to-face, hands-on, and then you get to practice on your own. I mean, those four, like, ingredients or elements of like kind of learning. It's pretty important, and we all need variations of that. But so the point is, the row your boat thing, a bit of a challenge where we're at. But let me talk about how you could do this to understand some of these things. Now, I'll back up for a moment and talk about the basic elements of music here. So when we're looking at elements of music in the time period, the first thing is we have this transition to a major minor tonal system. Now, this is a new tuning system that's established, and it's really based on the division of the octave into 12 equal half steps. The system we know as, we call it equal temperament. And it basically allows instruments to perform in any key, and it's still in use today. If we look towards someone like composer J.S. Bach, Bach was able to demonstrate his ability to write in every one of the 12 keys in his work called the WTC, which is an acronym for the Well-Tempered Clavier. This is a 2-volume keyboard collection, and it's a rite of passage for so many keyboard players at so many levels. It's awesome. So you could check that out. Now, we've also got some things happen in the elements in terms of rhythm, where we've got rhythmic styles. They're changing during the Baroque era from really, it's like they're changing from maybe the freedom found in something like, monody type style of the early Baroque to a more vigorous style based on like regular accents of the late Baroque. We're getting dissonant chords used more frequently for the purpose of, say, enhancing emotional intensity and color. So some things happening there with the elements for sure. Now, when we talk about like emotions emotions in music, we can't forget, at least for just a few minutes, to talk about that emotions were also expressed through the use of subtle dynamic changes as well as dramatic changes. We talk a lot about things like terrace dynamics, where you've got like it's a really loud passage and a soft passage, or a soft passage and a loud passage, just alternation between loud soft or soft loud, and they're that's a part of it. But we have subtle dynamic changes and like dramatic, and I suppose you could look at the subtle dynamic changes in terms of crescendos and crescendos gradually getting louder over time, decrescendos gradually getting softer over time, and then terrace dynamics, which is those alternations between like these, really loud, and then soft, or really soft, and then it comes up. So we've got both the gradual and the dramatics. Now, if we move over to say like unity of mood, emotions, doctrine of the affections, these kind of things. In this time period, really, music was expected to arouse the emotions or affections such as joy, anger, love, or fear. So, in the height of the Baroque era, the doctrine of the affections was applied. Now, really, I guess a particular movement really aimed to like hit one of those effects or affections. And to attempt more would risk causing confusion and disorder in the listener or to the listener, or at least that was the thoughts or frame of mind for the time period. In today's times, when we look at, say, like emotions in music and unity, while these things still exist, there's certainly a lot of variety in genre styles or forms. And no matter what the genre style or form is, it might have, unity of mood. It could have conflicting or contrasting moods. It's like there's anything and anything. But kind of this is where we start in terms of like, the emotional connection and flow of music. Now, we'll delineate some of those things when we talk about, say, religious music, sacred versus non-sacred, secular versus non-secular. Just we could say, hey, when we talk about, religious and or church music versus, say, just straight up music for the concert hall that is not religious music, we'll make that very clear in terms of like what's happening there and what's it all about. Is is it programmatic? Is it absolute? Is it religious? Is it just music? Is it event music? We're going to get into that actually in the specific songs we study in the course, in the Baroque period. Okay, so if we go over to some of these other elemental things, we're going to get things like the melodic sequence And don't worry, the imitation row, row, row your boat, it is coming right up. So with melodic sequence, imitation, terrace dynamics, you get music notation standardized. These things are really some big ticket items for the time period. So if you're like, hey, what are those big ticket items for the time period? We cannot forget about the elements. Like this is the first time in history where we're looking at like we have this melodic sequence. This is our we get imitation probably for the first time here. We get those terrace dynamics, that alternation of loud and soft, which is this really big. We have jumps in there, but we also have some gradualities in there. If you were to look up all these terms just individually, you'll see like some very basic things. And it might help you, but I think the bigger help in something like a melodic sequence is you just have to listen to it. If you listen to it, then it's like, oh, I got that. For terrace dynamics, it's the same thing. You got to hear and listen to these kind of things. So if you listen to a melodic sequence, or if you listen to imitation, or if you listen to something that has terrace dynamics, it'll pop out at you. You might have to listen a few times, but it'll be a lot easier than just looking up a vocabulary word or taking my word for it. Listen to the music, and then I'll say, hey, check out this spot. It has this thing going on, and you just practice to get that to make sense to you. Now, for music notation, you just have to. This one you could Google music notation from the Middle Ages versus music notation from Baroque times and music notation from modern times, and it would just pop. It would pop like, oh my gosh, like Middle Ages. It's gonna feel like it's dots and squibbles and then you're gonna look at regular notation and go, hey, it's cleaner. You still may not be able to read it or understand it, but I think having those pictures to look at from say the Middle Ages. And maybe looking at music in the late, early Baroque, but musical notation from Middle Ages, Baroque, and modern day times, and just looking at those pictures, it will make a lot more sense than just memorizing or learning some, vocabulary word. So let's talk about imitation. All right. Now I'm gonna, yeah, you got that. Row, row, row your boat. Okay. So with imitation it's basically a repeated melody, and it moves to a different voice throughout the song or section. Now, imitation can be strict, it can be exact, but it can also be clean cut or overlapping. Now, if it's clean cut, it means that I'm going to have this melody going on, and then if it's clean cut, the melody will finish, and then I'll basically have the melody come in right afterwards. But as soon as this one comes in, like I'm using my hand right here to kind of show you, like this one would actually keep going, thereby making it sorry polyphonic, which is interesting. But you can have what we call like overlapping imitation or stretto, which the melody is here and it hasn't finished yet, and the next voice comes in and interrupts. And so that's the crux of very basic imitation. So if it's overlapping, it just means that before the melody finishes, the next voice instrument, group, or singer, they're going to interrupt the melody and start the exact same melody in another voice. So you get that word that I was saying, stretto or stretto. Okay, so if we explore imitation a little bit more, well, I'll talk about it with the row, row, row your boat, but we are going to actually explore this more with the life and music of J.S. Bach. But if we take just a moment now as an exercise and we just say, hey, let's take 3 people or 4 people, I think it could work either way, but maybe a little smoother to understand if we say, let's take 4 people and divide them up, whether it's 4 people or 4 groups of people. And we have them all sing row, row, row your boat while overlapping the exact same melody. When you do this, something cool kind of happens. Basically, each person will sing the song only once and then stop for the sake of the exercise. The key is just sing. Now, I'm not going to sing it, but I'll say the words. It's going to be row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So if we divide this up into 4 parts or 4 sections, it would be row, row, row your boat. Number 2, gently down the stream. Number 3, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Now, that's not the only way to separate or divide. That's kind of how I'm choosing to do it. I mean, but you could take, basically take groups and just cue them on when they're going to sing, so you can kind of learn this more in a live class setting. I suppose reading about it and hearing about it can be kind of cool. But You divide up the song into these 4 parts or sections and get it split amongst the voices or groups. So then basically group A or group 1 is going to start on row, row, row your boat. And then group 2 comes in with row, row, row your boat, while group A is on gently down the stream. And then group 3 comes in with row, row, row your boat, while group A or group 1 is on merrily, 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 merrily. And then group D, or I guess, group 4, however you want to think about A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Then group D comes in with row, row, row your boat, while group A is on life is but a dream. And as confusing as that might sound, it's just an overlapping, probably easier to do, say, in a class. But it's basically setting it up where you're just cueing, all right, group 1, go. And then when right when group 2, right when group 1 is actually about to go to gently, you cue group 2 on row, row, row your boat, right? And you can even say, well, right when you could say, okay, well, when group 2 is about to move to gently, then the next group starts, row, row, row your boat. So you can do everything in reference to group A or group 1, or you can do everything in reference to the previous voice that entered. And don't let any of that twist you up in knots. It's just a way or idea to kind of think about all this. So, but remember, for this to work, each group can only sing once, and then they have to stop for the sake of the exercise or experiment. This is just an exercise or experiment. And as I was saying, if it makes it easier, each group could just connect to the previous group instead of the group A reference. Either way works. So just some things to think about. So when we're looking at terrace dynamics in terms of this alternation of loud and soft music, we don't want to forget about that in the times, but also the gradualities of, we have crescendos and decrescendos in music, and we have music notation standardized, these kind of things. So, I was saying earlier on the elements, is we don't forget to just, this is where like your friendly Google search will help you out, where you look at Middle Ages music notation versus, say, Baroque and then modern day times, and you'll basically see that our music notation was standardized during the Baroque period, and it's basically remained the same system since the Baroque times in terms of how we write and notate musical compositions. So, all right. Well, while I wish we could sing, I think that gets us rolling on Music Elements 1. Now, for Music Elements 2, we want to make sure that we know and understand that, like, hey, in the early Baroque, it's a homophonic texture. And when we talk about homophonic texture, we're talking about, melody and chords, i.e. melody and harmony. And then the late Baroque, we get, all this like density and fugal type music. So we're looking at polyphonic texture, 2 or more melodies at the same time. Now, we also have the basso continuo in the time period. We're going to get to piano in a minute, but really what we have to remember is, it's like you hear all these things like you got to crawl before you can walk, and it's like you got to learn the rules before you can break the rules. And you also hear things like, it's not things like, but you think about like the time period and kind of the instrument. It's like we know all these things in our modern day times, but we don't always know where it came from. So what's my point? With basso continuo, we don't have a piano yet. Like, it hasn't been invented. It's about to be. So one of the things that we had to do in compositions in these times is like, okay, I need to get like a bass line going. Who are you going to get? Let's get a cello. I need to get some chords. We don't have a piano yet. And even when we did get the piano, people weren't feeling it. They weren't vibing it. They weren't feeling it. Like, people were like, I don't know about this whole piano thing. Eventually it becomes a hit. But, it takes time, So they basically just split up bass and chords with, and this is just one example, You could use other bass type instruments, but you might use the cello and the harpsichord to get this, what we call basso continuo, splitting up of the bass line and the chords. And then basically the harpsichord would be sitting down. You'll see this in a lot of music appreciation textbooks where you'll see like a harpsichord is sitting down in those times. And then you'll see like one of the bass player, whether it be cello or whatever instrument they're using, play at the lower notes, they would basically look over the shoulder of the harpsichordist, and they'd be reading some kind of a shorthand notation. So that's kind of how all that work. The fugal example, this Bach, it's a Bach fugue on guitar. I think it's, for me, it's fun to share different kinds of musical samples or examples. But in your time, make sure to check out all the musical samples examples, whether they be in the PowerPoint like I've done in this one, or particularly everything's going to be on the YouTube playlist. So check all that stuff out. It's to kind of, the idea is, when I say melodic sequence and you go back to Music Elements 1, then you can go listen to the song. If I say fugue, you can go listen to the, Bach fugue on guitar. Because we have to look at things like, okay, it- you know, if you want to understand something like charge, well, and you listen to that, then you might be like, oh, well, first, Mr. S, you forgot to say that early in the lecture. Sorry, my bad. But you might hear charge at a sports game. So once you hear charge, and I'm saying, hey, you might hear this at a sports game. Go like it makes a lot more sense when I say melodic sequence, charge. Maybe you heard it at a sports game, and you can kind of make more connections this way. So you can kind of make sense of all this material in a digestible way that it doesn't dumb it down by any means. Still is pretty challenging, but just I think hopefully makes it more relatable and connectable. So imitation can be pretty tough to figure out sometimes. So we hopefully by now we understand. Okay, melodic sequence, charge, sports games, imitation, row 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 your boat, terrace dynamics, alternation of loud and soft, music notation standardized, and go look up those pictures to kind of help you get all that to pop at you. All right, now let's move over. That's Music Elements 1 and Music Elements 2. So just make sure you take a look at that music. Now, one of the upcoming assignments, I always use this in music appreciation. For as long as I have been teaching and will continue to, it's so much fun such a fun class to teach. But knowing a little bit about like some different string instruments, I've always been mesmerized or captivated by Stradivarius string instruments. Why why are they so popular? Are they really worth all the millions of dollars? Did they sound any different? I've asked myself those questions over the years. Is there something special about the wood? What's up with the guy that made the instruments? There's all these questions that I had for many, many years. And so I remember when I came across a YouTube video where they did a lot of research and multiple experiments. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I got to make sure I incorporate this in my class. Now I don't want to give all the thunder away in the live stream. Even if I did give the thunder away, I think the important thing on the sometimes I use Stradivarius string instruments. Sometimes I use that YouTube video as a journal assignment and or a Padlet assignment. It depends on the class and the semester. But either way, the important thing to try to figure out is okay, well, in the YouTube video, make sure you take notes. Like, what's the name of the violin? What are the names of the people in the video? Do you think, in your personal opinion, that they're worth millions? Can famous people tell the difference in blind studies on Stradivarius string instruments versus modern day? So, right here, I'm kind of just highlighting strings are the nucleus of the symphony orchestra, and what I mean is it kind of really all starts there. We're talking about violins, violas, cellos, and double bass. So we want to make sure we keep that at the top of our minds in terms of strings really kicking things off here. Now the number you find is a little bit different on the Strads, so it's somewhere in that 1,000 to 1,100. You might find other numbers on internet or other books that say 12 or 1250 or 900. I mean, we're in the ballpark, so I'm trying to keep us right around there, 1,000, 1,100. But you may see other numbers. 4 to 600, so that number's probably changed, but we're somewhere in that neighborhood. And as these numbers get updated or changed, I just try to keep things in terms of ranges there. Now the average cost is 3 to 4 million for say a Stradivarius instrument, maybe particularly a violin. The biggest one I think I found was one that was sold for around 16 million. So I think the challenge here is, are Stradivarius instruments are they really worth millions? Do they look prettier? Do they sound better? Did they pass the blind test? These are really things that I want you to be thinking about as you're preparing for that particular assignment. So it's I want to give it all away on the live thing, but I do want you to I want you to watch the video and take some really good notes. But don't forget who's in the video. At the beginning of this video, you need to make sure you're paying attention to. What's the guy's name in the video? What's the name of the violin? who's the concertmaster in the video. Are they talking about family and friends? Just really pay attention to people, places, really get all those details in there. So it's the big question of, what's up with Stradivarius string instruments? Is it, are they worth all that money? And, you know, if so, why? Or if not, why? What do you really think from, the lecture and the assignment? Like, I want to dig into that part. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. The orchestra begins to take shape. So we do get some technical improvements. Things are starting to move. So what we're getting here is, we got strings, violin, violas, cellos, double bass. Like we're slowly like that's we're kind of all starting there. We get woodwinds, brass, and percussion. We know strings are the nucleus of the symphony orchestra: violin, viola, cello, double bass. You heard me talk about. Where do we start with woodwinds? Well, we start with wooden flutes, oboe, bassoon. We have not got to clarinet yet. That's going to be coming, and there's lots of other woodwind, brass. I mean, there's tons of other woodwind instruments coming, more brass, a whole bunch more percussion. But this is kind of basically the start. With brass, you get horns and trumpets. There's no valves, and with percussion, we get timpani. Timpani would be Italian. We kettle drums would be the English. We typically, in all the music stuff, we lean into all the Italian. So you'll like a lot of our musical terms are Italian, and we just either we don't have to memorize 4 or 5 different languages, but we pretty much end up just memorizing like vocabulary words and different languages. And if we forget, of course, we have pocket dictionaries to take a look. But basically, there are a lot of musical terms that we're looking at as Italian. That's probably our mainstay. That I don't know. You could maybe say most musical terms are in Italian, but not all of them. German composer is going to mix and match. If it's a German composer, they're going to use the Italian as the standard, but they're also going to put things in their native tongue as well on the scores and parts. So that's really up to the composer and whatnot. But we're looking at maybe around 10 to 25 musicians in a Baroque orchestra. And then it just basically keeps moving up there. We'll talk about ranges as we move forward. And if you want to look at, say, like our first type of maybe event music, it would be George Frederick Handel and music for the Royal Fireworks. Now, I'm not going to talk about the history here because I talk about that in the Handel lecture. But you heard me earlier mentioning about like event music. You hear me talk about genre, style, forms, events, and just all these different, programmatic absolute. One of our examples of event music would be music for the Royal Fireworks. So check out, that would, Google the history of the piece and listen to the music. It makes a lot more sense when you know what the music was written for, specifically if it's actual event music for something. We'll talk more about that later, but that's just kind of to help get the ball rolling there on event music. Okay. So what about the piano? This is interesting. Bartolomeo, if I'm saying that right, Bartolomeo Cristofori. Okay. So inventor of the piano, we're looking at around 1720. Piano originally called forte piano, and this was a modification of the harpsichord. We had 60 keys, 5 octaves. Now, eventually, we dropped the forte, and we just call it the piano. The whole thing about calling it forte piano was basically we all learned that formula for kinetic energy. What is that? I think for a second. I think it's 1/2 mass times velocity squared. So you look at kinetic energy and you're using that formula, and you go to a piano and you can increase that energy, and you can tap it like real chill, real soft and light, and you can get those softer dynamics. But you can really dig into it and get those louder dynamics. And we're going to get pedals with the keyboard as well. You basically get a very wide range of dynamics with the piano, and you're also able to control sustain and articulation through the use of pedaling. But in the beginning, it was a modification of the harpsichord, and there was still a lot of tinkering and playing around with it to try to find it. It didn't really become a hit, um, even though the piano was invented at the tail end of the Baroque period, because we're talking the Baroque period of 1600 to 1750. And then we look at our culminating, or the most probably culminating figure in the period being Johann Sebastian Bach, J.S. Bach, or Bach, and Bach's dates are 1685 to 1750. Basically, ends the period. So our modern day piano has 88 keys from A0 to C8. So it gives us 7 octaves, and you have hammers that strike the strings. But the harpsichord, which is the main keyboard instrument of the Baroque era, aside from religious services using organs that typically would be thought of, designed, created, and built into the structures with the pipes. In modern day times, we can you know have all this technology that can just do all kinds of cool things, but here they had to do it the hard way, I guess. So you can get an organ sound on all kinds of different, keyboards. But in there, I mean, you're talking, we had the harpsichord, the main transportable keyboard instrument, and then, of course, in services, you had the organ. But either one of them could be used. I mean, well, I'd say either one. I mean, you could use the harpsichord pretty much however you wanted to in the time period. That was really the keyboard instrument. But it's a tough one because you look at, Bach's primary instrument was organ, so it's like these are the big instruments, but you weren't going to move an organ around, and the harpsichord you could. And organ really more for, church religious services, and the harpsichord pretty much used for everything else. So in the harpsichord, you have the strings that are plucked by quills, and so you don't really have control over kinetic energy dynamics. I mean, you'd probably break something if you tried to play it like you play the piano. So all you'd have to do is look at a video, or even just look at the inside of a piano with the hammers and the strings, and the inside of a harpsichord with, plucked by quills, and you'd see like, you look at it and go, okay, you could see there's a big difference. And then when you hear it, you're like, oh, I get it. So like for a harpsichord used on, say, J.S. Bach's Brandenburg Concerto Number 5, they had to really think about where they were going to place the harpsichord on the stage so it could be heard. But not only that, not only placing of the harpsichord, but for the composer, they had to think about like the voices and how they were written in the music, so that you could actually hear the harpsichord. It was done. It was done very intently. So composers that are writing music that included the harpsichord, they had to pay attention to who else was playing. Is there anything overlapping? Who's going to be the lead lines? Are we going to be doing polyphony or solo or homophonic? It was a lot of working to make sure that there was understanding there. Okay, so let me move over back to that. So if you take a listen to the Bach harpsichord Concerto Number 1 in D minor, this will give you like, I think, a pretty awesome example of like, all right, cool. Here's the harpsichord, like just throwing down some cool stuff. If you check out Bach's, let's see, Concerto Grosso, like, check out Brandenburg 5, Movement 1. That's got a really amazing harpsichord moment in there. You can check that out. Okay, let's keep it moving here. Sorry. Gotta make sure to take some little breaks in these streams. All right, so we've got some opera to talk about, a lot of opera stuff and the singers. Okay, so the next thing we want to take a look at is, what's opera? Where did it come from? How can we get a little bit better understanding on all that? All right, so basically, one of the great changes in style between the Renaissance and Baroque era was the shift in texture from polyphony. This consisted of several independent melodic parts, to say something like monody, a texture in which a single melody stands out. So, what we have here in this monodic style, we're looking at this expressive style. Now, This monody or expressive style, this was developed by a group of Florentine artists, writers, and musicians known as the Camerata. From this style, opera was invented. So, um, this is where when you hear me talking about Renaissance and Baroque, um, trying to make sense of all this, it, I guess it can get a little bit confusing because in the early part of Baroque, we weren't into polyphony yet. So, like, this early part of Baroque starts off more, it's not busy and dense as we get to late Baroque. So, you know, you heard me talking about earlier today, like, okay, what's with all these textures, and I'll scroll back up so I can kind of remind you a little bit. But when we look at early Baroque texture, we're talking about homophonic texture. When we look at late Baroque texture, we're talking about polyphonic texture. But as we fast forward and keep moving forward, okay, cool. We look at, opera components. So, from Renaissance, early Baroque, late Baroque, we're going to get some really basic homophonic texture in early Baroque, and we're going to get to this all this polyphony. But this expressive style from monody, this is where really the birth of opera. So opera is not just Baroque. When we look at opera music has stood the test of time and is still around. But if we were to say, what is the newest? If I were to ask the question, what is the newest genre, style, or form of music in the Baroque epoch or period? Opera. That's the answer. So the melody and chords of Baroque music, this is different from, say, if you look at the Renaissance style. Um, you get this system of notation called figured bass. And in the figured bass notation system, you have a keyboard player would improvise the harmony from these numerals that the composer would place above or below the bass line. You talk about um, these different numerals or Roman numerals. Now, um, the we talked about basso continuo earlier, so just remember with basso continuo, all you got to have is two instruments. Um, one one melodic bass instrument like cello or bassoon, and another playing the chordal, the chords, or a chordal instrument like a keyboard. Important to get all that happening. Now, if I come over here back to just opera and its components to kind of dial this back in, we want to make sure that we know how to define monody is solo song with instrumental accompanist, and know the camaradas this group helped bring this forward. And if we were to just say, let's straight up define opera. Opera is defined as a large scale musical drama, and we could say that opera is defined as a large scale musical drama. And I see poetry, I'm like, well, maybe poetry is a stretch, maybe, but opera is a large scale musical drama that combines acting, scenery, costumes, singing, and instrumental music. That much we got to include in there. And when we look at something like an aria, we could say, okay, well, an aria, I believe this is Italian for air. An aria can be happy song, love song, dark song, sad song. An aria can be about anything. So check out this Henry Purcell song that I've got here, Dido's Lament, or When I'm Laid on Earth. Check that out. Now, some other words on opera in terms of things that operas have so that we understand. Um, Opera and the recitative. Now, I have some video links to kind of help us understand, but basically, for opera, we have a couple things. We have arias, we have recitatives, we have things like overtures, and we have what's called libretto and the librettist. Now, it's a lot more to it than that, but really, we're just kind of talking about the basics. So when we look at the basics here, we go, okay, um, how do we move the plot forward in an opera? Well, for a plot to move forward in an opera, you need for a plot to do anything, you're going to need a couple things in an opera. You need the recitative helps us kind of move the drama, the action, the plot forward. So recitatives are basically the spoken like or text like dialogue, but it's also sing like too. I look at, say, recitatives or recitativo. I look at recitatives as that it's straight up spoken like or text like dialogue, but for many people they hear it as more like talk sing or sing talk. Nothing wrong with that. Um, there's basically these different, when we look at these kind of things, um, it can be like, more sing talk or more talk sing. It can be less, it can be more. It's not like it's just, this or that, but that's basically what it is, spoken like or text like dialogue. And you're going to hear talk sing, or you might think sing talk. When we have these kind of things in opera, it helps us move the plot forward. That's how the plot's going to move, the drama, the action. And when we get to something like the aria, that really, like, it releases the tension of what's happening. Then it's like wow, it's that big moment. It's like the recitatives are leading to that moment. So I've left some links in terms of like secco and accompagnato, where you'll have recitatives where you've got, a recitative and it might be like dry secco, or um, you might have like accompaniment. Now there's typically, most of the time, there's going to be um, instrument or instruments, or a small group of instruments, and that kind of all depends on the period and the composer. So that's the basics of opera and the recitative. Now, when we look at other components of opera, and these are not just Baroque components, they're components of opera. We look at something like an overture. Now, an overture in opera, we could define that as an overture in an opera is a musical introduction before any of the action takes place on the stage. Yeah, that works. Let's do that. But we know that opera has like text, like someone's got to write like the text of the opera for the operatic singers. So we have libretto, which is the text of the opera, and we have the librettist, which is the person who writes the opera. And as much as I get excited about opera music, it's incredible. I want to save some of that thunder for upcoming lectures where we're going to talk more about specific operas and the story and cast and all that kind of stuff. So this is basically some how to define opera, the components of opera, and as I'm saying earlier, the whole heart of today is the intro or the overview of the Baroque era. Okay, now let me double check to see if there's maybe a few more things I could share in terms of operatic music before we finish. Um, let's see. Um, yeah, I think we're good on that. We can, we can come back. Um, we get to do some more opera later. Let's go to one of the other big ticket items I was talking about, which is the rise of the female professional singer, rise of the professional female singer. And then we have this ensemble of the ladies, helping lead the way. So we get increasingly professional women were singers, instrumentalists, and composers. So we're talking about Francesca Caccini and Faustina Bordoni and Francesca Cuzzoni, Elizabeth Claude de la Guerra, Barbara Strozzi and more singing like Sleepyhead Cupid. There's just, I'm trying to get as close as I can to those names, but you think you get the point. The point here is not me trying to, worry about getting every single last name and with perfect pronunciation here on this live stream, or even in an upcoming video that I'll make talking about them. The bigger point here is recognizing that this ensemble of the ladies was amazing, and we need to talk more about that in the history, like about just making sure that the history of music is all encompassing, that there are some really amazing musicians out there, and we want to make sure that no one's getting lost. So looking at the ensemble of ladies and the things that they were doing, super important. Take a look at Barbara Strozzi's Sleepyhead Cupid, and for some of these artists, we'll come back to them in later lectures and talk about more, and take a look at some of that music possibly. That varies from semester to semester or session to session, and course to course basically. So definitely a shout out, and I want you to take a listen to that composition. Make sure that's on your list. Okay. Now, one of the other things in terms of singing for the times was we had something called the castrato. Now, the castrato was a male singer who was castrated in boyhood to retain soprano or alto vocal range. This voice type would combine the lung power of a man with the brilliance of the upper register of a soprano. In the Baroque era, this voice became associated with heroic male roles. This practice diminished greatly in the late 18th century and was made illegal in Italy around 1870. The countertenor or falsettist is a natural high male voice that often replaces the castrati role in modern times. So, just a note on singing and some singing of the time, the castrati or castrato. And yes, it was made illegal. Um, okay, so let me move over to genres, forms, and styles on the PowerPoint. I want to make sure that you're paying attention to these pieces. These are going to be some big pieces that everyone in the class will be responsible for knowing. They're testable pieces, questions, listening, the whole 9 yards. And in upcoming lectures, I'm going to talk more about each one of these in detail. So we want to make sure that we know the opera piece right here, making sure that we know the Dido and Aeneas, Henry Purcell, Cantata Sleepers Awake, J.S. Bach, Oratorio Messiah, George Frederick Handel, the Concerto Solo Violin, The Four Seasons, Program Music, Antonio Vivaldi, specifically Spring, the Concerto Grosso Brandenburg Concertos, J.S. Bach, but the focus on that one's going to be Brandenburg number 5, Movement 1. And you have this on a quiz, and the fugue in G minor. So the Organ Fugue in G minor by Bach, you see that on a quiz. You see that on the final exam. You see it on a Padlet. In some semesters, I also have a journal on it if there's no Padlet. So the cello suites by Bach. Hopefully that's a good time for you to kind of dig into some of those 6 unaccompanied cello suites. But there's one that you're going to see on a quiz, assessment, or assignment, and that's going to be Prelude from the first cello suite in G major. So make sure you're checking out these different examples of genres, forms, and style. This won't be all of them, but some really big ones to kind of think about, focus on, listen to, and study. Okay, so let's take a look. We'll go down a little bit more. Culminating figures of the time. Okay. So our culminating figures of the time, we want to take a look at Antonio Vivaldi, 1678 to 1741, specifically Four Seasons, Spring Movement 1. That's a huge assignment. There's a listening guide on that in the course, and I do a separate video just on Vivaldi and talk about that music as well. Now, I talk about this in many lectures, but I have how-to videos that explain how to do every assignment in every course that I teach. But I also break down the assignments in way more detail in the live lectures or recorded videos. So it's to everybody's advantage to just take some time to watch the videos and listen to those things as you're prepping for assignments, Padlets, quizzes, midterm, final, etc. Okay, George Frederick Handel, 1685 to 1759, specifically the Messiah, his oratorio, the Messiah. But from there, we want to focus on the Hallelujah Chorus. And for Johann Sebastian Bach, Brandenburg Concerto number 5, this is a big one in terms of class discussion and or assignments from semester to semester. But really for Bach, the one that I use probably more frequently is going to be the Organ Fugue in G minor. So the 3 big ones for Bach are going to be Brandenburg Concerto number 5, Movement 1, the Organ Fugue in G minor, otherwise known as Little Fugue, and Cello Suite 1. Now it's hard just to pick 3. For George Frederick Handel, if I add to that list, of course, definitely keeping Messiah, the Hallelujah Chorus from Messiah. But we also have to make sure we know a little bit about water music, and we could even go over to maybe music for the Royal Fireworks or Zadok the Priest. Those are big ones for George Frederick Handel. For Vivaldi, it's pretty extensive too. But for Vivaldi, the Four Seasons are going to be the big one. So I don't have a list 2 or 3 more songs for Vivaldi, but I will talk more about other awesomeness of Vivaldi soon. So these are our culminating figures there. Okay, and last bit of what we're here to talk about today is just, the idea here is just to basically it's the introduction or the overview of the Baroque era. So what's the idea? The idea is not to get everything and anything from just a 1 hour lecture. The idea is this is the intro, this is the overview, and then as we move forward, we're going to talk about, okay, here is the Handel lecture, here is the will be Vivaldi, but here's the Vivaldi lecture, here's the Handel lecture, and here's the Bach lecture. But this is basically the where we're, hey, here's the intro, here's the overview, and then as we move forward in the rest of our Baroque lecture series, then we actually have a composer lecture, composer video lecture, and have some fun. So I think that's pretty good for today. I'll take a look to see if there's any questions in the live stream. Oh, yay. Glad to have some people join us. I know there's some people in and out for the live stream, due to timing. And as always, the live streams, it's not like a requirement to be here live. I'm doing it live, and it's always fun to have people join me. But as I put in all my classes, um, I live stream so I can. It's kind of fun for me, but hopefully it's fun for students when they're watching because they can see like the video as it relates to their class in that particular day, time, and year. It's kind of important in terms of modern, like what's the current, not watching some video from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's not to say that like those videos aren't awesome, but I mean, if I'm teaching something and I change it, well, I got to change the stream or the video or whatever. So it's just kind of nice to keep the flow current. So I understand probably I'm going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students watching this video after the fact until I change something. Of course, that's totally cool. For this summer, that's under 100 students. What maybe I have 50 to 60 in music appreciation, and another chunk, another chunk of students in a different class, American music. But at any rate, many of you may not make it to this part of the video because now it's just kind of a ramble scramble. But my point being is just this is the whole vibe or overview of like hopefully what the Baroque period is all about and what you're expected to learn and how to kind of navigate the period in terms of the vocabulary words, the composer, the frame of mind, the history, really to just get you as much info as I can on the period. So I see Jay Texas. Yay. Good morning, Jay Texas. Thank you for attending. I see Melissa. Yay. Good morning. Thank you for attending. Melissa 2006. Awesome. Awesome. That's it. So that's a wrap for today. Stay tuned for my next lecture where we get to dive into Baroque worldliness. This is Handel. And we're going to talk about Handel's life, a brief bio, and overview. Basically, with Handel in the next lecture, it's an overview of Handel, but we're talking about Handel's life, bio. We want to make sure we look at Handel and opera and the Royal Academy of Music. Handel and his orchestral suites, coronation music, and the Hallelujah chorus. But it's going to be much more than that. It's pretty much that's what I'm listing right now. But I'm going to get as much Handel as I can, squeeze in that time period. So yeah, that's basics. More music than that. I mean, yeah, I'll probably water music and other things, but basically the big overview of Mr. Handel in the next lecture. So, well, thanks again, everybody. I'm Professor Ron. Enjoy the music, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.